Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Been talking to you about Blue Water Climate Control for a while. They've been a great sponsor of the podcast, great friend of Volquest.com. I want you to be sure to check them out for whatever need you have for your air conditioning unit, particularly right now when the heat index is where it's at and the unit's running as hard as it is. If you need any kind of repair, they're the crew that can take care of it because they're going to do the right repair the right way the first time, with a group of trained experts who know what to do, going to service your needs exactly the way you need them. So give them a call. Check out Jeremy and his staff at Blue Water Climate Control online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com, or always you can give them a buzz and set up your appointment that way. If you don't want to do it online, you can call them at 865-299-2290. That's our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Plenty to get to in this podcast. And as we look at the month of June and sort of how it has shaked out across the board in the month of June in recruiting. Plenty going on. Rob, let's start with you a little bit with some basketball recruiting here. We'll hit that first. Rick Barnes has had a bunch of guys on campus, and up until the midnight hour, I guess, for the dead period, they were working the recruiting trail as well. Your assessment on what Rick Barnes and the staff have gotten done in recruiting this month?
No commitments, and I didn't expect any at all. Be clear about that. But I think the guys that they brought in shows you what their board looks like at the top, and it's heavy with big time talent. They only brought one kid in, Deontay Green last week, that was not a 5-star prospect, or excuse me, a top 100 prospect. They had 2 top 20 kids on campus, and Brandon Miller, in-state forward from Nashville, and Kassan Wallace, the guard from Dallas. 2 guys just right outside 5-star status, number 31 and 32 in our rankings, and Jalen Hood-Schifino and Dylan Mitchell, who's finishing up his visit Monday night, and obviously BJ Edwards. I think from that group, I think BJ is probably the only one that's really close to deciding. I think it was big for Tennessee that he was here with Dylan Mitchell this weekend. Mitchell's a lot like Mitchell and Brandon Miller are a lot alike, really versatile 6'7", 6'8" guys that are forwards but can get out in transition, can put the ball on the floor, can shoot it a little bit. And so I think getting BJ here with him was a good move for Tennessee. I don't think Brandon Miller is very close to making a decision, but when he does decide, I think Tennessee is going to be firmly in the mix, top 3, top 5. Like where they are with Kassan Wallace, and that sounds odd to say since he's from Texas and there's not an obvious tie there, and you got Baylor that just won a national title. You get Chris Beard at Texas now, who played for a national title when he was at Texas Tech. But keep hearing that he wants to leave the state, wants to get out and stretch his wings a little bit, and he's known assistant coach Rod Clark since he was in 8th grade. So Tennessee had a lot of talent on campus, and they weren't just for show visits. I think these are guys that are serious about Tennessee with their interest, and Tennessee is very serious about them. Now, I'm not saying that some new names won't emerge, and there were some big guys that they didn't get on campus. And when another French prospect, Johan Traore, and I may have botched that last name, but I felt like I said it with confidence.
I like it.
So obviously Mike Schwartz has got some ties to French basketball that Tennessee has used a couple times now over the years. He's one to keep an eye on for sure for Tennessee getting involved with. The big kid I mentioned in the War Room a few weeks back, Dom Campbell, from way up in the Northeast, is a guy that Tennessee has already offered, but we'll see if that offer stands after they evaluate him in July. And that's kind of my last point. I think most of their probably 75-80% of the guys are real serious targets at this time. I think we're on campus in June, but don't rule out some new guys popping on that list in July when coaches get out. They've been out to a couple of like state high school association run events, but it will really be back wide open in July with the travel ball, the shoe companies. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see, a new name or 2 pop up.
All right. Last thing on basketball recruiting I want to ask you about is how big is Keon, if Keon Johnson goes in, say, the top 10 of the draft, does that have an immediate impact, or does that have a real impact in recruiting, Rob? Or does Rick Barnes have enough of that that doesn't carry the weight that it would with, say, a young coach who's got his first top 10 draft pick. You know what I'm saying? I mean, does it carry that type of weight, or is it kind of like, yeah, that's Rick Barnes with another big time prospect?
Well, I mean, I think it's, and I don't want to overstate it, but I think it helps for sure, man, because you've shown you can take the blue collar, hardworking kids that were under the radar, like Admiral and Grant, and help get them big paydays. But then, this year they showed that they can also take a guy, and really this time last year, nobody thought Keon was one and done. Maybe the coaches did after they'd seen him in June in workouts. But Jaden was, the guy that was expected to be one and done. So I think when you show parents and prospects that, yeah, you're not going to mess kids up. I mean, they can come here, and if you're not going to derail them from being a one and done guy. And in Keon's case, I mean, like, Keon gets most of the credit for being a freak athlete. Rick has nothing to do with him having a 48-inch vertical leap. But they also didn't stunt their development. I mean, they helped them, I think, take another step and get there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important to show kids that. It's been a while. Who was the last guy? I mean, it's been 7 years since Rick was at Texas and had a draft pick. So, 17, 18-year-old kids not going to have a lot of recollection of who was the last one. I guess maybe Miles Turner that was one and done for Texas. So, I mean, yeah, I think it enhances your reputation. I think makes you more attractive because, I mean, Brandon Miller, probably a one and done guy. Kassan Wallace will have a chance to be a one and done guy. So I think, they're going to be eyeballing programs where, that's possible for me. They've done it.
All right. My last hoop question for you. Vescovi's going to go to the Olympic trials for his country to try to make the Olympics. Obviously, you're not going to derail anyone from doing that. Does it mess up anything with chemistry with him, with the turnover in the backcourt, the turnover that you're having, or do you think the summertime stuff there is not that big of a deal?
I mean, I think it would be better for Tennessee and for Vescovi at Tennessee if he was here this summer, especially with as many new pieces as you have coming in that are going to be contributors. Huntley Hatfield, Justin Powell, Kennedy Chandler, Jonas Adu. I mean, all these guys are going to play, but at the same time,
it's the Olympics. The chance to be on an Olympic team.
If you get the chance to do that, you do it.
Yeah. Here's why I don't think it's as big a deal, Rob. The kid literally walked in January and 2 years ago and jumped into the middle of a season. And I know that season got, was what it was. But I mean, like, I think the kid just has a personality that everybody enjoys. Do you not agree with that? Like, I mean, I just think that he's one that can jump in and having not played with people and be okay.
I mean, I don't want to overstate it. I'm just saying it would be better for Tennessee if he was here for, that time and instead of playing for Uruguay. But again, you don't fault the kid. And I'm sure Rick Barnes doesn't fault the kid. If you get a chance to represent your country and play in the Olympics, you do it. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime deal.
Yeah, certainly. And so we'll wish him the best. We'll see what happens as he continues to try to work his way to make the Olympic team. You mentioned basketball wrapping up its official visitors. Tennessee is wrapped up on the football side. Austin, the hectic, crazy month of June that has everybody wanting hours upon hours of sleep. If you're involved in football with the way that it's gone, give everybody an overall broad view, a 28, 30-day view of what you think Tennessee got done during this month of June when things opened back up and as wild as it was. What's your biggest takeaway? Maybe the better way to ask it, your biggest takeaway from Tennessee's 28 days of work, 29 days of work.
I think camp-wise can be a lot better. But I think as far as unofficial visitors and official visitors, I thought Tennessee had a really good month. They got a ton of kids in here for unofficial visits. They got, a nice group of official visitors here over the course of the month. Now, you could argue, should they have waited on some of them? Maybe. But, I mean, I don't think you're really in a position to dictate that very much because you don't have any kind of on-the-field presence, Brent. So until you can play games and stuff, it kind of is what it is. And, so, I mean, like, I think you look at it differently. Like, like they had a bunch of camps, probably too many for the number of kids that were here. But do I think that they had a solid month in recruiting? I do, because I think that they got several kids here unofficially that were able to come see, this football program. Kids that I think Tennessee has a good solid shot at. Kids that I think they've improved their standing with. And then other kids, even like a guy like Branson Robinson, Tennessee's chances to get him, to me are far fetched. I mean, I just think he's likely to end up at Alabama or Georgia. History tells you that. But I think for Tennessee, anytime you can get a 5-star on campus for an official visit, it's good for the look of the program and to be in the mix for, a kid like that. So, I thought it was a good solid month. Can it be better? Yes. Will it be better? Yes. But for their first kind of go with this, I thought they improved every week with the official visits, doing, this and that. They improved little things, and I think they'll only get better from here.
Well, and I mean, I think there's there's always that debate on when do you bring a kid in for a visit, and I don't have the full list in front of me. Austin, you may have it. You may be able to jump in on this after as well. But I think probably of the guys that they visited, I would think more than half of those guys are going to be off the board before September 1 hits, and you have a chance to visit again. So, I mean, I don't. It's hard to sit here and say you shouldn't have. And Austin's not saying this, but I know some people have said, wasted visits or what are you doing here? But I mean, this for a lot of those kids, this was going to be your only shot because they were going to be off the board come September 1 and not give you a chance to come in for an official visit. So I don't know that you had a ton of choice, particularly given the number of visits you had to play with. I mean, it's hard to sit there and go, hey, we're going to try to push you back to October, November. But because I'm not sure how many kids were going to wait till that period of time. Because I think kids are wanting to make decisions this summer more than ever before.
Yeah,
well, they are.
And just because I don't understand.
And they
go ahead, AP.
I was going to say that they are because that's the it thing, like the it thing to do. Like we said this last week. Caden Curry going to take all of his official visits this season. He is the exception. The rule with this current group of kids is take all your officials in the summer, or most of them come to a decision at some point, either in June or July, and so if you look at all the guys Tennessee brought in, Addison Nichols is going to be off the board before his high school football season. Ryan Brubaker's coming off the board July 4th, and of course Tennessee's not really a factor there. Mo Clipper, I think, will do something before September. You go right down the list. The Ryan Bayer kid who did not come in, but was going to, I think, makes a decision before then. Marcorius Squirrel White going to make a decision sometime in the month of July. I mean, you can go right down the list, and they're all coming off the board at some point, either between now and mid-August, because all these kids want to get a decision done and get their spot before their senior year begins.
What do you think that is, and when did it change? I mean, because remember back in the day, it was, first off, you couldn't take visits as a junior until just very recently, but you'd have 5 or 6 or maybe 8 official visitors for a big home game. I mean, for Georgia or Alabama, but I mean, it was not uncommon. Back a million years ago, it was just me and you to sit down on a Sunday afternoon in January and have 12 or 14 kids to call that had just been in on an official visit.
Well, I think
those days are gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. One, early signing date. 2, the fact that kids didn't get to go anywhere a year ago, I think has sped some things up too. And I think thirdly, and we've kind of talked about this and sort of dubbed it this way, I just think a lot of kids want to make a reservation. I mean, cover your base, because if you're committed somewhere before the start of your senior season, if you get hurt, it's a bad look for a school to cut you, right? It's you think you're going to be okay there, and I just think that kids are looking to secure something, and then if something better develops, then they're okay with one-upping somebody. And I think vice versa. I think coaches are more okay with that. You don't get near the flack that you used to get if you take a kid in July and you trade up in November. Now, if you take the kid in November and you trade up the first week of December, you're going to take a lot more heat for that and a lot more flack for that. I just think kids are trying to reserve spots and to hold their reservation. The last thing I'll say too, because of the early signing period, you got to take your visits earlier. And so you're not going to sit there with 5 visits at the end of November, trying to squeeze those in before you sign. So I think the early signing day sped up a process that was already on track to be sped up anyway. I think that's the biggest difference for me and looking at it.
Rob, it's just like when I plan a Disney trip. I book a ton of restaurant reservations, and then when we get closer, I dwindle out the ones and call the ones I don't want. You pick the best ones. No different. No different.
Do you pick that on like a French fry rating and then like wait time and like what times are available and you cut out? I mean, how do you go about the culling process of the restaurant venues in Disney?
Oh, Hubs. I expect things from certain people.
Best chicken tenders has definitely got a box next to it to check.
From you, it's just a low blow. But I mean, you're right though. I mean, like that's just what it is. I mean, like I think a year ago, had things opened up, you would have saw, because everybody, if you go back when the last staff had that spring run, what was the narrative out there from every national analyst? There's going to be a run on decommitments this year when you get to November, December, but there never was. And why? Because those kids never could take visits, and people were not going to flip flop around on schools because they just weren't. This year things are open, so like I think I think this year might be the year you see the flip flopping around and a lot of decommitments, because kids can actually go out and see things. They're going to book their reservation, as you say, and then when they get to the fall, if something comes along better, they're not going to hesitate. Last year they hesitated to do that. I don't think kids will hesitate this year.
No, I agree with that. Here's the other thing that's going to happen a year from now too. I'm not saying it's going to slow down some of the commitments, kids making decisions, but June next year is not going to feature 25 or 30 official visitors, because you're just not going to have that number of visits to go with anyway. And I think kids are going to take some official visits around spring practices. They may do some things in April. I don't think you're going to see this rush of kids taking 4 official visits in the month of June. I mean, and I'm not knocking any kid out there anywhere, but if you want an example, and Rob, this, we talked about this on Sunday night, an example of kids being restless and not having the opportunity to go anywhere the previous year. I mean, we talked to some kids that Sunday night, they had that was their 3rd or 4th college they had seen the weekend, not the week, the weekend. Saw 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. And so I just think this year, such a mad rush to get in as much as you could get in because you didn't have the opportunity to do it a year ago. I don't think there's any way it will be as hectic and crazy busy as it was this past, this past June that's just closing up. I don't see how it can be, because you're going to be able to spread it out.
And however, this goes back. I mean, this is not exactly related, but it is kind of related just to show how much things have changed, at least since your ancient self has been in the business. Me and you had a long talk with Dwayne Goodrich on Sunday night, whose son is a rising sophomore. Dwayne brought him to camp, and it was hilarious. Dwayne telling me and you that he didn't even think he was any good until after his junior year, because he hadn't, his high school coach hadn't given him any of the letters that he'd gotten. He said he had no idea, that Michigan, Notre Dame, Miami, Tennessee, Ohio State were trying to recruit him, and he found out kind of in the spring of his junior year. Went to one camp in the summer, as he was the number 1 cornerback prospect in the country. Went to one camp. He went to Michigan, and then took 4 visits starting in December of his senior year.
First week of December of his senior year. And that's obviously now he's got a kid who is going to be a sophomore who has been to
he's somewhere 15 times by the time he was a junior.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his son's been to just a couple of places because he's trying to be pretty guarded with him right now, because, as he said, he's got to earn a starting spot on the varsity team before he starts thinking about college offers and college scholarships. But I mean, it's just different. I mean, Tennessee had Sammy Brown in, who's a 24 linebacker who is at camp, who's a really good looking prospect. He'd been to 6 or 7 places this spring. He's got an offer from every place he went, and he's going to be a sophomore in high school. So it's just all sped up, and it continues to speed up faster and faster. You know, but I do think it'll be a little bit slower, Austin, next year because it's going to be spread out over, you know, multiple months, whereas this just opened up for essentially 30 days. It's basically how this thing opened up, you know, to try to get done. So you're going to have the opportunity to come on visits in spring next year for spring practice and, you know, junior days back in, you know, February. And so there won't be hardly as much of a rush as there was this past year. I think the one thing everybody in college football is wondering, Austin, is will the NCAA continue to leave the private workout stuff wide open, or will they stymie that or shut that down or alter that in any way? I think that's the next big thing in the month of June, in the summer months, is are they going to continue to allow those private workouts? Are they going to put some kind of legislation in that to try to regulate that a little bit more than it is right now?
Well, I certainly think that really hampers camp. Like, you know, would you rather, you know, go out there and go against some guys that, you know, maybe aren't as good as you in a camp setting, potentially, or would you rather just take a personal workout from your potential position coach? And if you're one of these coaches, don't you, you know, what do you think? I see. I would rather see them in a camp setting than the person, because like the way I look at it is like you know, you do the camp, and then if you like them in camp, then you take them over there and you run a few little extra things after the camp. I mean, like I don't know how you feel, Brent. Just to me, it makes more sense to kind of go back to, you know, camps. And I mean, these schools end up doing personal workouts anyways, but now that these kids can request these personal workouts, it just to me is I don't know, it's taken away from the camp experience, so to speak. At least it did this summer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, to further illustrate your point, Tennessee had an assistant coach leave camp on Sunday. He left the camp that was in progress on Sunday to go handle a personal workout at the practice field. So that kind of tells you where the personal workout stuff is. I think, Rob, that one of the things, if you're a position coach, one of the things you do like about the personal workouts is you can quickly get to whatever you want to see, and not get, you know, bogged down and some of the other maybe agility drills, repetitive drill. Like, you know, do you really need to see the quarterback go through a bunch of agility drills if you're wanting to see a quarterback throw? You know, same thing for defensive linemen or an, you know, an offensive lineman. Although I would like those guys in the physical one-on-one setting, but I think if you're a coach, you can probably get more answers you're looking for in a private workout faster than you're going to in an afternoon of a camp where there's a couple hundred kids there.
I agree, especially when you're talking about, you know, anybody can show up, pay their $40 and go. I mean, it's hard to, you know, make it certain that like the best guys are going against the best guys all the time. I mean, unless you've got 12 cornerbacks and 12 wide receivers, which is never going to be the case. I mean, you're going to have maybe the first couple reps, you can have the top two or three kids at those positions going against each other, but that's not going to hold up, you know, over the course of a 10-minute drill.
Yep, certainly not. But the competitive part of it, you know, you can also see that way. Who wants to compete? You know, is somebody going to the back of the line? You know, you can't always see that in a private workout. So I mean, I think there's pluses and minuses to both of them. Which again, it's going to be interesting to see what the NCAA says, if they're going to regulate that or if they're going to let it keep going, that, you know, the way it's continued to grow, because it's becoming more and more popular for sure. Without any doubt about that.
I always thought that was one of the best values of the rivals camps. I mean, you get kids, I mean, and they had them this year, but it was very, you know, limited, not nearly as many. I mean, you could see who wanted to hide, and you know, when you weren't just, you know, playing against the best kids on your high school. I mean, you're playing against the best kids from the Atlanta metro area, you know, down to over in Alabama. I mean, we've been to some of those deals where, I mean, there were some dudes there, a lot of them. And you can see. I think you can learn a lot when you start throwing kids that are, have always been the best in their high school and it's not close into competition with other guys who have always been the best in their high school and it's not close.
Yep, I don't disagree with that at all. As for the current football team, a little time off here through the July 4th holiday. If they want to, they can go home. If they're in school, they obviously had to remain here. Workouts are voluntary this week, and then they're back at it to start the second part or the last month of summer conditioning and summer drills there before they get into fall camp and competition and all of those things there that take place. Of course, coaches are going to be on vacation. It will open back up in recruiting for the last week of July. I don't think anybody's going to be doing, I don't think you cannot do any official visits at that point. It'll just be unofficial visits. There won't be any camps. I think people might do the barbecue type things or just kind of the gathering type deals.
You can do personal workouts then.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's
you can't do camps, but no camps, just personal workouts.
Okay. I was not aware of that. So that's a good note there because you may see some kids certainly do that, and coaches may want to certainly get that done as well. We've talked a lot about changing in recruiting. We talked about this in the last couple of podcasts, but July 1 is a big date with name, image, likeness. We saw the Wisconsin quarterback introduce his personal logo on social media on Monday to prepare for his whatever he's got brewing coming up to start name, image, likeness. We know Georgia players have a couple of deals in place as well. And talking to a lot of people, guys, on this thing, I think my biggest takeaway as July 1 approaches is nobody really knows how all of it's going to work. There's just a huge, from all sides. I mean, from business owners, players, coaches, administrators, compliance, NCAA, conference commissioners. There's just going to be this long period of kind of filling things out. What works? What doesn't work? What does a player want to do? What does he not want to do? What's the best way for player X to increase his brand, make more money? How does a business, maximize the dollars if they're going to incorporate student athletes as a part of their marketing plan? How do you regulate it? How do you manage it all? I mean, it's just everybody you talk to, you come away with just as many questions as you had when you started the conversation. That's my biggest takeaway, which means it's going to change college athletics. How significantly? We think pretty significantly, but I don't know how significantly at this point. I don't think anybody does.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I mean, like Danny White told you, and then, when you sat down with him back in, when was it, April? That, it's the biggest challenge I think facing college athletics today, and I don't think it's close. I mean, it's always been ludicrous to suggest that these guys be treated as amateurs with the revenue that they generate for the universities through ticket sales, TV contracts that are just astronomical and growing all the time. And I mean, I've got no problem with these kids getting compensated, but how it's going to impact the landscape of college football, I think, is going to be the most interesting off the field thing that we've seen since I've been doing this summer.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody today, and they think one of the things, Austin, that you may see is you may not necessarily see a corporate logo on the backdrop of an interview, but you might see the kid's Instagram handle, his Twitter handle, and in the case of the Wisconsin guy, maybe his logo has to come up anytime he sits down and talks to the media. There's a background with his logo there. Just things like that could be possibilities. I mean, that's kind of where we're going.
And Hubbard, I saw you mentioned this in the chat about the NCAA trying to police it, having deals in place before kids, during the recruiting process. But I mean, how are you going to police that? I mean, really?
Idea. I mean, I think if you see that a kid's got a deal with, with school X that's 800 miles away or 500 miles away, then maybe you got a red flag there that something's going on. But I mean, if Zion Williamson had a deal with PepsiCo and Mountain Dew when he came out in Anderson, South Carolina. I mean, who knows who was putting that deal together for him? But I mean, what's the red flag there?
Or what's to keep, a kid comes on his unofficial visit in the spring of his junior year, and whether a coach or a player or whoever lets him know, hey man, if you come here, Corporation X is going to hook you up with a 6-figure endorsement deal. I mean, that's how do you police that? You can't.
No, I mean, you can't. I mean, so I just think, again, there's a lot of hopes that you're going to be able to try to police something, desire to do that. How it all shakes out, how it all goes is going to be really interesting. I think the other thing too is, Austin, how far it trickles down into the high school ranks. Can you do a deal with someone who's not who's still a minor? Is something that's going to come up at some point. I mean,
look at a guy like Ty Simpson, who's already 18.
Sure.
Who's to say that you can't go ahead and get a deal done with him? I mean, you're right. I mean, like, to me, there's just a lot of questions to be answered. And it could go several different ways. To where like it doesn't change it a ton, or it's just obliterates it, and what we've always known is no more. Which, I mean, I think what we've always known is going to be very, very, very different. But do you see some things that are the same, or is it just totally new?
AP, it's all going to. All I know is all going to be fun and games on the high school scene until some kid strikes a deal with Pilot and takes money out of Mark Packer's pocket.
Can you only imagine if some kid tells Packer, "Hey, look, you got to put my logo up in the post game interview"?
I mean, again, we don't know how it's all. I mean, are kids going to get their own TV deals, radio deals? Are they going to do their own live streaming stuff? I mean, you got. I guess it's Juju Schuster who does this. He goes on some social media app and like plays fans in Madden, and there's talk that you might be able to do that, and you can have a subscriber base of that. Can't you see some kid who's going to jump in and play college football EA Sports deal, and you can for X amount of dollars you can play him in a game. I mean, just crazy stuff like that.
We know the answer to this. Can they hire representation? Can the families hire somebody?
I think they're absolutely going to have business managers. I think absolutely. I mean, particularly for the high profile guys. I mean, if this were happening under Trevor Lawrence's watch, Trevor Lawrence would have Team Lawrence. I mean, he would have a business manager. He would have a branding expert who would help him manage all of that. And I think one group if you're a sports agency and you represent professional athletes, I think all of them are going to have a team of however many people who are going to be in charge of being business managers for NIL, for name, image, likeness deals, Austin, because it's the gateway to getting them for professional representation if they're good enough to make it to the NFL. So I think that representation is going to come out of the agent world more than it is anywhere else.
Well, I think if you're a football program, you've got to, I mean, look at, like, now you have like a guy that handles the recruiting side, a guy that handles transfer side. So you have to have all these different pieces, so to speak now. So, I mean, you're right. I think that, kids will have that, I mean, we saw guys like, Barton Simmons go from, covering recruiting to working in football. Who's to say that I'm not going to run Cade? I'm going to be managing Cade by the time we're, off the podcast.
I'm surprised that's not already happening. I figured that was in place.
Uncle Austin LLC. I can hear it and I can see it now. That's the logo.
How about this? This just occurred to me. I mean, you have recruiting coordinators, all that. Do the universities hire somebody in the athletic department that solicits advertising opportunities for players? And why wouldn't you do that? I mean, that'd be an advantage.
I think that's certainly possibilities, to help them foster deals and to help them educate or to put them in touch with people. I mean, if you're trying to police it, right? I mean, you get your own in-house person to help do those deals on the up and up as opposed to somebody outside. I mean, again, I think right now it's just some people are going to jump into it immediately, really fast, really hot and heavy. And I think you're going to have some people, and when I say people, I mean student athletes, schools, businesses, corporations, who are going to take a bit of a wait and see approach and let it all sort of settle down a little bit before they go. But what we do know is starting on July 1, the game is changing in terms of what players and student athletes at the collegiate level can do, and how dramatically it changes over the course of the next months and years is going to be really, really interesting to watch. And going to be changed. It's going to evolve. It's not how it looks in the month of July is not how it's going to look in December. I can promise you that. What all it evolves into, no one is sure at this point. But that's something to watch and track as we get ready for fall camp. We got plenty of football coverage coming up. We got some baseball stuff coming up. Position previews will be coming down the pike. Opponent previews are getting ready to come down the pike in the next few weeks as well. Lots of stuff to talk about. Plenty more recruiting coverage, as Tennessee may make some recruiting noise this week as well. So we'll keep.
Oh, there's a tease.
We'll keep tabs on all of that, as Austin Price always does for everybody in the world of recruiting. That's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. For Austin Price, Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.